In our second of 3 videos dissecting the bike industry, we talk about handlebar width, cockpits, and geometry. We asked you to vote on whether you thought these topics were worthy innovations or just marketing hype. And as I mentioned in the first video, there was a great turnout with over 2,000 of you voting on these topics. If you missed our first video on wheel size and tire widths, be sure to find it in the link below. All right, let's jump right into it. To say bikes have changed over the past decade, I'd say is an understatement. And while some of you might find that geometry from 10 years ago is fine, brands have continued to evolve their bikes in order to make more confidence-inspiring rides. And one of those things has been to increase the top tube length, and in doing so, shortening the stem. You might notice that mountain bikes around 2012, they came with stems in the 100mm range, with shorter effective top tubes. But why not keep the stem long and the top tube short? Well, according to our readership, the majority of you think the newer Geo is better, with 55.6% of you voting that it was a worthy innovation, 535 voting indifferent, and 366 people think it's marketing hype. Year-to-year changes are definitely harder to quantify, I give you that. But when you look at changes between decades, things seem to make a bit more sense. So let's take a look at the Salsa El Mariachi from 2012 and the Salsa Cycles Timberjack from 2022. The Elmar has 40mm of less reach and 15mm shorter top tube. So then you add in the stem length, which is 100mm for the Elmar and 50mm for the Timberjack. Adding the top tube length and stem length, we get what I like to call real reach. The real reach for the Elmar is 514.3mm and a shorter 503.6mm for the Timberjack. So what does all this mean? At least in this case, the longer Geo with shorter stem actually puts riders in a less stretched out and more comfortable position. It also puts you in a more central position in the bike, which gives you better maneuverability when you need to lean around the bike from front to back or side to side. All right, so paired with other factors like slacker head tube angle, bigger travel forks, and wider bars, a shorter stem with updated geometry will not necessarily make your bike feel more twitchy like it would, say, on a bike from 10 years ago. Generally speaking here, a shorter stem will result in faster handling, but it also will put you in a more upright position, while a longer stem will result in slower handling and it will also stretch you out more. Yet with the longer Geo, having a shorter stem still helps maintain stability at higher speeds, and especially when you add weight to your handlebars when you're bike packing. I, for one, am really happy with this change. It makes fitting a bike more comfortable and easier for all-day riding, and it simply just puts you in a better riding position. With more and more people using road bikes for a variety of off-pavement pursuits, bike parts are quickly evolving to fit those needs. And one of those things evolving is the drop bar. The drop bar has been around for a while, ever since the mid-1890s. Where safety bikes had bars that could reasonably be considered drop bars. In the 1980s, early mountain bikers were actually found retrofitting old road bikes by bending the hooks or drops on road handlebars outward to provide more leverage, thus flare. It seems there was a desire for this, so a few brands, including WTB and Specialized and On One, developed something to fill that void. But it didn't really catch on. That is until Salsa launched the wood chipper in 2009, with the widest available wood chipper coming in at 46 centimeters. Today, 46 centimeters is becoming the norm, with 50 or 60 centimeter bars available. All right, so folks were a little bit split on ultra wide bars, with 41.5% voting for marketing hype, 39.8% voting for worthy innovation, and the remaining had no opinion. I guess the question here is, where do we separate wide from ultra wide? So when I moved from 46 centimeter bars to 48 centimeter bars, the difference really wasn't that noticeable. But moving to 52 centimeter bars, that's when I started noticing the width. I've been using the Ritchey VentureMax XL bar for the past 2 years, and it's turned into my favorite bar. It not only helps with more clearance on your bar for bike packing cargo and cockpit doodads, but it also is going to create more leverage, especially on bikes that are somewhat designed around off-road travel, like the Cutthroat that it's on right now. It also sets me up in a better position, allowing me to be more prepared for an obstacle ahead on the trail. But ultra-wide bars do mean you create a larger bar, and that means more weight. It's also not an ideal setup for someone with, say, a shorter reach, torso, or wingspan. And I guess it would likely take away a few aerodynamic characteristics. But I would argue with a wider bar, you are going to have more confidence on off-road terrain. So that just might be a moot point. Am I sold on ultra wide bars? Not yet. But I do sure like 52 centimeter drop bars. I just want to take a brief moment to let you all know that this video is supported in part by Salsa Cycles. The Salsa Journeyer is designed to be a gateway to a wide range of cycling experiences, whether riding or racing gravel, going bike packing, or loading up with racks and panniers, or frankly just riding around town. Journeyer's long and low geometry boosts stability, increasing rider confidence, all at a very inviting price point. So to check out more inspiring and educational content on the Journeyer, head to salsacycles.com or click on the link right here. Similar to ultra-wide drop bars, alt bars have really caught on recently, especially with the growth of more comfort for longer or all-day rides. So your typical flat bar comes with maybe, 9 degrees of back sweep, very minimal rise. Alt or alternative bars have at least much more sweep, as you see on this bar, and a little bit more rise, and can even have a few more hand positions. One of the first widely accepted alt bars was the Jones H bar, but today there are endless options. So our viewership certainly has accepted alt bars a bit more than ultra wide drops, as nearly 65% of the votes were in favor of alt bars, 20% had no opinion, and 15% thought it was marketing hype. While it does take some getting used to, and some of these bars will drastically change the way your bike rides and feels, and maybe the way it was designed, bike packers especially have flocked towards alt bars for their ability to put the rider in a more upright position. Some of these bars come with drastic sweep in the 30 or 45 degree range, like the Surly Moloko bar, or less sweep but more rise like the BMX looking bars from, say, Money, Oddity, and Moonmen. So I actually might be maybe the minority here, at least when it comes to bars with drastic amounts of sweep, as these bars over multiple days creates hot spots and numbness on my hands. And I simply just don't fit as well on those bars as, say, a bar with 15 degrees of sweep. Obviously, the upside in general is clear, comfort, but that does depend on each individual. On the flip side of things here, these bars typically have more material, creating more weight. Ultimately, I do think options are great, and creativity is too, and alt bars offer plenty of that. Suspension seat posts aren't anything new. There have been various contraptions to suspend and cushion bike saddles since the dawn of cycling. But recently, back in the early 1990s, the more advanced thud buster was invented by Ryan McFarland. Today, there are a variety of brands using springs, elastomers, and air to aid in comfort by absorbing persistent small bumps and vibrations that come from gravel, roads, double tracks, and trails. Although most of these are typically used on drop bar bikes, as most mountain bikes now come with dropper posts, which we're going to get into here next, these parts have gained popularity in the adventure space over the last handful of years. This technology has also been added to stems, starting with the Griffin Flex stems back in the 90s. Remember those? Today, Redshift, Cane Creek, Connect have all developed their own, allowing for 20 millimeters of travel. This topic also showed mixed results, with 44.5% stating it was a worthy innovation, 36% voting for marketing hype, and the rest had no opinion. This topic is a classic. If you haven't tried it, you just might not think it's a worthy innovation. At least this was my take last year before I tried offerings from Redshift, Cane Creek, and PNW. And in my testing, at least speaking on the seat post, it certainly does take away some of the harsh characteristics from a rigid seat post. It reduces overall chafing, and it just creates a much more enjoyable experience. The same could be said for the stem, but maybe not as noticeable at first, and it's definitely harder to quantify the benefits in my opinion. The neat thing about this is most of these systems are adjustable based on your weight, giving you the ability to hone in on your perfect ride characteristics that you are seeking. So what's the downside here? Well, more moving parts means more things that can break. It also means more weight. And more parts typically means more complexity and thus more money. There's also a learning curve. Having the stem move up and down makes it a little dicey on some technical bits. And the seat posts, it can definitely be an issue with pedal performance. So dialing them in before you go on a big ride is probably a good idea. Well, hello there. The dropper post. A love-hate relationship, right? Let's rewind a little bit. The height right. Ever heard of it? It was actually the first adjustable seat post designed by Joe Breeze and Josh Angel, which launched in 1984, using a simple spring and collar system to drop your seat really at will. Fast forward to the late 1990s and early 2000s and the first modern day dropper. Now, there are conflicting reports as to who first launched the modern dropper. Wayne Sizz was working up his gravity dropper, while Kindshock and Crank Brothers were working on theirs. The big moment was when RockShox introduced the Reverb in 2010. However, the Reverb had a horrible track record and was prone to failure, just like this one. This delayed the standardization of droppers until a few years later when they just became simply more reliable. Today, you can find dropper posts on almost every new mountain bike, and you'll even find some on a handful of drop bar bikes. 1,700 of you thought that the dropper post was a worthy innovation, with 83.7% in favor, with 177 people voting for marketing hype, and 155 people had no opinion. So I purchased my first dropper post back in 2014 for my Trek Fuel, and it was quickly an eye-opening experience. It enabled me to get my saddle out of the way and allowed me to maneuver and shift my weight on top of the bike. Over the years, I've realized that this has allowed me to not only get down steep hills faster, but also safer as well. And I would argue that I would pick a dropper post before some sort of suspension because it allows more maneuverability, which allows more body bracing and thus more comfort than suspension. The obvious downside here is the amount of pennies it takes to buy these things. Although they have come down in price and they have become more standardized, they are still much more expensive than, say, a regular rigid seat post. There are more things to break, obviously, on these as well. Say on a bike packing trip, it's not always ideal, but there are also ways to fix a broken dropper post with, say, the Wolf Tooth Valet, which also doubles as a way to help attach your seat pack to your dropper post. Frames are now coming with internal dropper routing, and some can even fit 200mm dropper. But Jesus! Raise your hand if you've ever had a total meltdown sweat fest trying to thread a shifter cable through two little holes on your frame. God. All that said, if there was one thing that allowed me to progress my riding to where it is today, it would be the hardtail mountain bike and the dropper post. And yes, we even asked Ronnie Romance if he ever tried a dropper post, because I questioned, I've never seen a photo of him with a dropper post. He said yes. He said other things too, but he said yes. So like most of these topics we've spoken about thus far, carbon is not necessarily new, but it has come a long way in the past handful of years. Carbon bike parts and frames have been around since the 1970s, 1980s, when manufacturers particularly were trying to make the lightest possible road bike for racers like the Tour de France. Eventually, those technologies made it to the mountain bike world with frames and parts and now wheels. But to say it was smooth sailing would be an understatement, with many issues and recalls along the way. But today, it has become one of the top 3 frame materials, along with steel and aluminum. Many of us have opinions about carbon frames versus other materials, but one thing that seems more widely accepted is carbon components, such as rims and bars. And voting reflects that, with 57.5% voting that it was a worthy innovation, with 32.3% voting for marketing hype, and the rest had no opinion. So for starters here, I think it's safe to say that carbon is not perfect. But I would also argue that no material is. In some way, shape, or form, you will need to sacrifice something compared to the next. Carbon fiber parts in bikes weave carbon fiber strands and set them with epoxy resin. Carbon was invented to, yes, reduce weight and make more aero frame set for those road cyclists, but perhaps the best characteristic are the way frame manufacturers can now manipulate the frame, like adding flex in some areas and making it stiffer in other areas. It also dampens vibrations, but studies actually have shown that it's not all that different from, say, a lightweight or a triple-butted aluminum handlebar. Although the price has gone down over the past, 5 to 7 years, carbon still is more expensive than aluminum. From my experience, when I'm pedaling a drop bar bike, it's simply not nearly as noticeable. That is until I actually go ride on some dirt or some gravel, where the bar starts to flex and give a little bit more, which also gives me support, especially over those longer rides. But I feel like carbon bars are more of an influence on a flat bar, especially paired against an overbuilt aluminum bar that we're seeing coming on many mountain bikes now. Simply put here, at higher speeds over rough terrain, a carbon bar just simply has more comfort versus what I can only explain as a harsh characteristic of aluminum. As far as wheels are concerned, there seems to be more of a difference here. So carbon wheels tend to build up easier. They're stiffer right off the bat, so they tend to stay in true longer. But one thing I've noticed firsthand is the durability. Yes, I have found that carbon rims are stronger, at least in the near term. A few years ago, I actually had 2 instances where I bottomed out some rims. One of them was a carbon rim, one of them was an aluminum rim. The carbon rim, I dented the rim, and that's not awesome, but it remained true and it was totally fine. The aluminum rim, I ended up denting the rim, but it also was out of true. It wasn't tacoed, but you get the point here. Now, yes, I get it. There is a lot more characteristics that go into this, like wheel building technique and the durability of the aluminum versus carbon rims. Now, carbon fatigue versus aluminum fatigue is a different story, and I'll definitely get back to you in, 10 years or something. All right, so that about does it. What do you think about these topics? Cockpits, geometry, carbon? Let me know below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, pedal further.